Great. Okay, so Walking Writers Salons. Our guest this evening is Sarah Royston. We came across her originally, actually. She submitted a piece called The Orchards Estate to the Urban Tree Festival writing competition in 2023. And since then, we've sort of watched her amass awards for and prize-winning stories and things. She's a keen walker from in her local Hertfordshire countryside. And as you'll discover, many of her stories and tales are inspired by walking and her surroundings. We're going to be talking about Fernseed, which is her first story collection. And it's a sort of treasury of nature-inspired fantasy and myth, and reveals a lot about her knowledge and understanding of nature. So those of you who are kind of new to Walking Writers Salons, and Walk, Listen, Create, we support artists, performers, and writers who create work on foot or about walking. In the audience, we have Damaris West and Chantal Lyons, who are both our Walking Together writing competition winners from this year and our writers in residence. And what we try to do with the salons is we try to find out about how our guests approach writing as much about walking and what they're writing about. So Sarah and I will chat for about 15, 20 minutes, but they're a small group of us. So, I think we can sort of pitch in at different times. Sarah's going to do a couple of readings, which is great because most of you won't have seen the book, I'm sure. But it's only been published a month. And then we'll open up to questions, and guess what? We close with a multiple choice quiz. And her publishers, who I've never heard of before, called The Brag, are offering up a print copy of the book as a prize. So I'm just going to read Sarah's introduction that she wrote on the Walk, Listen, Create website. She's probably quite forgotten what she wrote back then when she originally wrote it. And then I'm going to invite her to choose a story which she's going to read to you. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Sarah. So Sarah's writing draws inspiration from queer ecologies, plant law, and the landscapes of southern England. She embraces the Hookland motto. Someone will have to help me out with the Hookland. The Hookland motto, re-enchantment is resistance. Her work is published in Dark Mountain, The Rumpus, and Crow and Cross Keys, among others. She lives in Hertfordshire and works at the Anglia Ruskin University. So over to you first off with a reading, Sarah.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks everyone for coming and for having me. It's really exciting to be here. So I thought I'd kick off with a story which is called Catkin. So it kind of brings together plants and walking. This is the third story in a triptych. So I'll just give you a tiny bit of context. This triptych of stories is set in a folkloric past, maybe early medieval, and it follows three sisters, Celandine, Cuckoo Pint, and Catkin. And the two older sisters have both disappeared. So one has run away into the forest, and the middle sister has been sacrificed to the Hollow Hill as a propitiatory gift to unhappy gods. And we've met a cuckoo and a wren, and the story now takes up Catkin, the youngest sister's story. So, Catkin. It is bitter blackthorn winter. My sister was given in vain. The sheep still sicken. Our stores run low. I'm a burden to my kin, sallow, stubby, and shy. A roving willow woman strikes a deal for me. I will serve a year and learn her craft. She warns it is a hard life, tramping on the track, but I've no wish to stay. I feel in my bones that my sisters are alive. Weaver's path may bring me word of them. She works with deft hands, spider light. Her baskets give, but do not break. My clumsy fingers bleed, and she binds them with betony. Carry on, Catkin, you've still a way to go. At lambing time, we load her cart and hitch a nanny goat. I've never been beyond the ridge. Now, far from home, I feel adrift. At night, I shiver in my shawl and think of wadwoes, whites, and wolves. My shoes break up and cut my heels. Weaver lifts the hem of her heavy hooded cloak. Barefoot is better. Soon the road is in my bones, my soul's as tough as hers. She has a cuckoo and a wren who nestle at her neck. Half wild, they come and go. But a kestrel never wanders. She stalks us, shadow true. Weaver names her Windhover. We take Icknield Way to Barton for the Whitsuntide Fair, then Ermine Street to York. We trade wares with pilgrims and tales with thieves. On the fosse, a warband passes as we crouch in a ditch. When winter bites, we travel west to lands of marsh and mud. Bitterns boom in rushes where the white willows grow. Weaver barters with the hookmen. Their voices are rough and teasel bird. Their tongue is strange to me. We hole up in a hut with thatch that sweeps the earth. When her hands are withy weary, she takes up her loom and threads. Lichen yellow, moss green, rosehip red. She lets me untangle the crisscross skeins. Sometimes I walk on the Black Oak Causeway. The paths are a maze through the forest of reeds. I think of roads that thread this land, the knots and nets they weave. Highways and holloways, hedgeways and holyways. I could trace them all and never tire, light as pollen on the wind. As my year is ending, we journey slowly back. At Candlemas, I see ahead the ridge that once meant home. I cry for my sisters, one lost in the wild woods, one in the hollow hills. Weaver shakes her head and laughs. They are well, silly girl, and you will meet them in good time. Wren and cuckoo told me so. I do not doubt her. I look up at the kestrel, still guarding our path. Is she your familiar too? Oh no, my catkin. Windhover watches, but not over me. From her pack, she draws a cloak, red and gold and green. Take this gift, Weaver says. You've still a way to go.
I was asking I was first of all, I said it's really a lovely story that you've read out and read it out so well. What I was going to ask was, how are the stories chosen for the book? Was that something, did you choose them, or did the Bragg choose them, your editor there? And how was it put together? Yeah.
Well, I was lucky enough to have a really wonderful editor at the Bragg, Kim Dean, and she's kind of created this independent publisher, and her vibe and the vibe of the publisher is really kind of weird and queer and magical and witchy and earthy and all the kinds of things that I love. So we kind of really clicked, and we kind of chose the stories together sort of around that kind of vibe. And I ended up writing 4 new stories as well, just for the collection, all on these sort of themes about, what we might call the English landscape. Many of you here are lucky enough to live in beautiful places around the world, but around about the sort of part of England that I live in, we have a lot of very flat landscape, a lot of quite industrial agriculture. And so what I was really trying to do with the collection, and what I think Kim really got, is try to find re-enchantment, try and find magic, even in these ordinary domesticated places. So that was how we ended up putting this together.
Well, I mean, that story itself is extraordinarily rich in detail, and clearly shows that you have a kind of keen observer's eye to what's around you and surrounds you. So when you come to writing, is that something, do you take notes as you go out for a walk, or do you walk every day? Do you walk to work? Do you walk, what's the score? Do you walk a dog or Probably not.
No, I cycle every day just to get around, but walking is more kind of weekends and the kind of luxurious day off that I occasionally get. I will go out for a walk, yeah. But it's a lot of kind of sort of semi-urban edgeland kind of landscapes that I would walk in. But I take a notebook, and yes, I love kind of just paying attention to things that aren't necessarily wild and beautiful, you know, paying attention to the way the graffiti sort of mirrors the lichen on the railway bridge, and just, you know, little things like that that help me kind of find beauty, I guess, in these ordinary places.
And you know, is writing stories, is that a distraction from what you might have to do at work? Are you an academic, or I mean, you're a sustainability or officer or something like that? So do you turgid? I'm sure your reports aren't turgid, but do you write non-fiction and then, you know, run away and write a story as an alternative?
Yeah, this is my escapism. So in my academic life, I do research, and it is not as exciting and creative as this. But I thought this was an interesting question you asked me, because I do try and bring in kind of creative elements to my academic work. And one thing I do is a lot of interviewing. So sort of, you know, doing qualitative data collection. I interview people, and it's like they're telling me a story, sometimes deliberately. Like in my PhD, I said to people, tell me your life story. But sometimes it's just they're talking about their work. But, you know, you can encourage people to develop a story. And then I love looking at the way people use language. I love finding those kind of revealing turns of phrase. And just recently, I was doing some work on how fossil fuel companies use and manipulate economic models to try and stop action on climate change. And one of my interviewees used this phrase, masters of the machinery, to describe the kind of control of the models. And I thought, oh, that's a great phrase. I'm having that. And I used that as the title for the paper. So yeah, tiny little bits of creative work. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think also uh, because we're so the enormity of those crises that we sort of face, we need to have stories to interpret these things for us. So I think there's definitely a place for stories in almost all writing around the environment and around ecology. But maybe we should come along and ask you, what do you mean by this Hookland motto? So you know, is Hookland a place? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me about Hookland. So Hookland is a place. Hookland is a fictional English county. So it's created by this wonderful writer, um, uh, David Southwell, and it's a kind of collective and collaborative project. So it's not just one person that writes it. And it exists mainly on Substack now, having previously been on Twitter. And it's basically this kind of a world, you know, as I say, an English county, but it's a slightly alternate version. It's a slightly weirder version of an English county. And it has all these different characters. There's a wonderful witch called Emily Banting, who I highly recommend if you are interested in kind of walking and plant magic. Have a look at Hookland on Substack and look out for Emily Banting in particular. I was actually I brought up the Hookland page so that I could read you a little quote, actually, because one of their recent posts was so lovely. Hookland County Council now calls them restricted byways. We call them by their old names: corpse roads, coffin paths, lich lines, wraithways. I reckon that's what the dead still call them as well, whatever bloody signs HCC put up. And this is from Jimmy Waterhouse in the Voices of Hookland project. So that's just a flavour of yeah, this kind of weird England that is being created here.
No, that's great. No, thank you. Perhaps you better explain a little bit about queer ecology. So
Oh,
rather
no.
than you defining things, we'll get you to define queer ecology as well.
Yes, so I'm not surprised that, you know, you all haven't come across this before. It's a very new set of ideas, and it's also very new to me. I only discovered it about a year or two ago. But basically, it's largely coming, well, it's a confluence of two kind of streams of thought. One of those is from ecology, as you were saying, Andrew, your study of ecology. So ecologists increasingly were noticing that nature does not conform to sort of binaries and does not, nature is not straight, basically. There are all kinds of animals that change their sex. There are all kinds of animals that, act in ways we might define as queer. There are fungi that have many thousands of genders or sexes, so basically everything's a lot messier than you might assume. And then that's on one side, but on the other side there's also obviously a load of thinking about kind of society and strands from feminism and kind of strands of kind of critical thinking about gender and sexuality, kind of challenging those same heteronormative assumptions about everyone should be one gender or the other, and everyone should be straight. And so these things are all coming together. And the queer ecologists are basically asking, how can we think differently about nature and our place in it if we break down these binaries and these assumptions about how everything should be? So it's about kind of questioning a whole load of things. I mean, even the nature of species, like this is one species, this is another, or this is human and this is nature. So it's about asking those kinds of questions about how everything might be just a little bit weirder, messier, and blurrier than is often supposed.
Well, I must say that's a great definition, and thank you very much. A good explanation. Okay, do you want to choose another reading? And
Sure.
I was going to say is if people would like to either put up their hand or take themselves off mute and ask a question, or write something in the chat if you can't speak because your mic isn't working or you're too far away or whatever, we'll bring them up. But yes, choose another one to read.
All right. This is a very tiny story, appropriately, about lichens. An introduction to some common British lichens. Lepraria incarna. Dust lichen, you say. Powder stains my glove tips, grey as trees, as fields, as sky. Your glass finds fragile empires in broken bark and stone. Graphis scripta, writing lichen. Your hands run gentle over birches, reading secret runes. The words mean nothing to me. Take off those gloves, you say. Cladonia pixidata, chalice lichen. I spot it first. You smile and pass the lens, warm from your grasp. Fairy cups rise from moss, inviting me to drink. Rhizocarpon geographicum, map lichen. We navigate terrains of ochre, mustard, gold. When your fingers brush mine, I know I am not lost.
Brilliant. I really like that one. I always remember I studied lichen through an open university thing a million years ago. And it was something called Nature Spot or something. And yeah, we all were going around with hand lenses, and we discovered actually the easiest place to do it was along the walls of London Brick. So London Brick apparently, which the yellow brick stock, which is called London Brick, is particularly fruitful. I don't know whether that's the right word, with lichens, and so you get more lichen species on London stock than any other brick in 100 miles or something like that. So it was great because you just walked along and looked at these at the top of the wall. You didn't have to bend down and crawl through to try and look at these things.
The great thing about looking for lichen on a walk is you can do it in the city or in a graveyard or in the country, and you can do it in the winter as well as in the summer. So it's like the best thing to look for.
So when did your interest in kind of plant lore and folklore and myth come? Was it sort of childhood? Was it?
Yeah. I was given the Flower Fairies books as a child. I don't know if anyone here knows the Flower Fairies books. They are so beautiful, and I got to know like probably over 100 species, just by being obsessed with these fairies. But yeah, it was Greek myths for me, and then the Arthurian legends. And I was thinking about what Matthew said about like when it's a story about the place that you are, and being sort of brought up in the southwest and going on holiday to Wales and Cornwall, you know, I felt like I could be in the places where these Arthurian legends were actually set, and that was incredibly exciting to me. So I think what I'm looking for these days is a kind of mythology and a folklore of where I am right now. And that, you know, that exists there. I've got books of Hertfordshire folklore, and that inspires a lot of my stories. But I also want to kind of, yeah, contribute and kind of build up more. And, you know, sometimes it's kind of modern takes on old stories, you know, because this is a different world. So one of the stories in the book is about a dragon slayer, and it's a real local legend from Hertfordshire about a dragon and someone who kills it. But I've sort of tweaked it and made it, you know, made the character a non-binary character, because why not have a non-binary dragon slayer? You know, if you can have a dragon, you can have, you know, any characters you want.
Say dragons are pretty weird.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think in the sort of 20s and 30s, and possibly even the early 40s, because of war rationing, it was different. But there were these sort of topographical series where people would write. That every publisher commissions someone to write a county story, you know, a story of whatever county it was. My uncle Ian was asked to write about Berkshire. I always remember that. I don't, you know, but and some of them played on the folklore and the myth of those counties, but most of them didn't. Most of them took it very straight and very scientific. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if that could ever be engendered again. Perhaps we should try to encourage that, you know, a sort of county by county folklore or plant lore, 21st century. So it might be worth exploring. Now, has anyone got any questions, or am I the person who's, you know, posting every question? Does anyone want to? Matthew, good. I'm glad. Well done, sir. Put your hand up.
Yeah, that was really nice. Thanks for reading those, Sarah. Just a quick question, really, about you mentioned the flower fairies there, and which are books I'm familiar with, and it seems to me that when one looks at landscape, folklore, etc., you find yourself at some stage exploring the supernatural, the otherworldly. I just wondered how naturally that came out, or whether it was something you had to search for, as in it was a choice to make it a collection, which does include things about the supernatural. Because hearing you read Lichen, which was beautiful, by the way, it almost sounded like a spell in places. It was really interesting that it had that sort of otherworldly quality. So I just wondered how naturally the supernatural element came in the writing of these stories.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the question. Yeah, I don't think it came to me at first, because I thought I wanted to write about climate change and ecological crisis. So I started writing climate change and ecological crisis, and I hated it. You know, I was like, I don't want to read this, let alone write it. And so I think the magic kind of crept up on me as a way of, you know, sort of telling the truth slant, and a way of kind of engaging with these awful things that are just too big and terrible to even get your head around. But yeah, I was thinking when you were asking that question actually about the C.S. Lewis Narnia series, and there's the book Prince Caspian, and something about that really resonates with me, because in the story, all the magic of Narnia is gone, right? So there's been like industrialization, you know, kind of men have taken over. And so all the dryads and all the talking creatures have hidden, and it's like they're not even there. And then the kind of during the story, they get awakened. And I feel like that's kind of how it felt to me. You know, when I started writing, I felt like I was living in a dead and a disenchanted world. And it sort of, I guess I gradually realized that stories are the way that we re-enchant the world. And if the stories aren't there about the magic of Hertfordshire, I'm just going to have to go and write them.
That's really interesting. I've always felt that. I feel that in terms of landscape, the supernatural is almost emerging as the actual truth, and we've just built things like cities and the artificial over the top of it, which have submerged it. And like by studying it more intensely, going in depth, writing about it, then you find a truth within that supernatural element, because we've lost so much. We've lost more than we'll ever know we've lost. So it's really interesting to find that, because I love reading about folklore, etc. And you invariably find yourself reading about things which are otherworldly, about creatures which we wouldn't believe ever existed. but I just feel there's something there. There's a truth at the germ of these ideas because they seem to emerge in writing all the time. You mentioned C.S. Lewis there, absolutely. Tolkien, you look at the medievalists of the 19th century, they all, when they go back in time, when they explore the landscape, they invariably find themselves playing within these supernatural elements and bringing them to life again.
Yeah, I think you're so right. There are different kinds of truth, aren't there? And things like, hybrid creatures,
Yes.
that's telling us something about hybridity,
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely, yeah.
and
And fascinating what you
shapeshifters.
said about, sorry, just fascinating what you said about non-binary as well, because it's seen as a quite new, scary idea. But I find, as I explored that, it's actually this binary world of two genders. That's relatively new. It's a very relatively new Western idea. So that was really interesting as well to hear that, because queer ecology, that's completely new to me. So definitely going to look into that. Sorry, I cut you off there, Sarah. Please
No,
continue.
no, I was just getting all enthusiastic about it. Yes, and I was going to say, yeah, like so shape shifting and things like that
Yeah.
they are telling us something about the world, and that these myths and these archetypes, they carry all kinds of truths that we need and that we might have lost. I think we need a rewilding, not just of the ecosystems, but of our minds.
Completely agree. That's brilliant. No, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
I mean, Damaris, we'll come to you in a second. I was just going to say maybe supernatural is no longer a word that we should use because, supernatural, it describes something, people will immediately think, oh, we know what supernatural means, but actually we haven't, it's no longer the case. But anyway, Damaris, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was brought up on flower fairies of the different seasons. Yes, beautiful pictures and lovely poems as well, and quite sort of responsible about what was poisonous and what wasn't, and that sort of thing, But I this is a very strange thing to say, but I'm intrigued by your name, Royston, being a town in Hertfordshire. I was brought up in Cambridge, and we had people called with surnames Cambridge and Ely and things like that. And I just wondered if you had any connection with Royston, maybe Royston Heath. We used to go there as children and see past flowers.
Oh my goodness, Damaris, there's a story in here that's about the past flowers
Really?
outside of Royston. Yes, it's called Burial Song, and it's about the legend of the past flowers springing from the blood of fallen soldiers. Anyway, sorry, yes, Andrew asked me about my name as well. We think it may possibly be linked with the Royston in Hertfordshire, which is just up the road from where I live. But there's other Roystons as well, so we don't know for certain. It could be there's one in Scotland and one near Sheffield as well. So.
Okay. And I wondered also if you knew Orwell Clunch Pit. That's what the site of special scientific interest.
Yes. I went there on a bike ride. It's beautiful. Yes.
Yes, I used to go there from Cambridge when at the weekend. I had a job I hated, and it was lovely to escape there.
Yes, and a fascinating history, because didn't they find an incredible hoard of Roman finds in that area?
Well, I think it was originally a mined in prehistoric times. For its so-called clunch.
Yeah. And it's one of those places you wouldn't think was full of kind of incredible history and kind of spiritual significance, but actually once you start digging, well, literally digging, and also, metaphorically digging, you just discover, like, you could do this anywhere in the world. You can find those layers of myth and story and magic.
Any other questions? Anne, you've mentioned something you've written in the chat about supernatural could be rewritten as hypernatural.
Yeah, that was something that struck me when you were, and Matthew and Sarah were talking, was that idea that it's almost like it's the true nature intensified or revealed in a way. It's not, we think of supernatural as, I mean, it is weird, but it's also that going back to that idea of the real. I've been thinking a lot lately about what's real. So anyway, so I was struck by, we always think of it as meaning things like ESP and stuff like that, that's people like ghosts, and it's more like, nature itself has so much going on that we don't know. And I really thought that came out in your lichen piece. I have another, more of a comment than a question, but also related to what you and Matthew were talking about. I like what he said about spells, this sort of quality, but one of the ways in both your pieces, I was really struck by the specificity of language and how it's not just storytelling. You were talking about myth making, but it's at a much, what you're doing starts at a much more granular level where you're really, it's just the words you choose for your descriptions are very specific and evocative. So and sensual in the case of the lichen story, where you feel, there was a lot of texture in there. And in the first story, I was also just struck by it's not just the names of plants, but you have the birds, you have the geographical features, all those are given such specific names. And I think that is something that myth does, that things both feel universal in a way, like there's a way that, oh, it could be anywhere, but also very, very specific language that feels very specific to the place. So I just was struck by that. I don't know if you have anything to say. And then after you talk about that, I have to tell you about my own encounter with a queer species recently that was like the most mind-blowing thing I ever saw. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to comment quickly on the first part then, because I really want to hear that second part. But I was just going to say, yes, the power that there is in names. I think that is spell making, isn't it? When you name things by their true names, and that is a kind of conjuring. And I love that. And yeah, in terms of specificity, well, thank you. But yeah, I think I need a season and a place before I can write a story.
That was the thing also, that you had Candlemas in there. I mean, that idea that, that you kind of had, it was tied to seasons we know, or that, the sort of, I think, oh, well, Candlemas is a church holiday, but it also goes back to all the pagan it's the, what do you call it, a round quarter day between, midway between winter and spring. Here we have Groundhog Day, which is one of them that, that's there. We have the US has this myth that if the groundhog sees its shadow, then there's 6 more weeks of winter, and that's February 2nd. So it's like there's so many layers attached to that. All of them, all the those midway points have these things attached. So I like that. So
I've now just Groundhog Day means, because I've absolutely no idea. I've had so many Americans mention Groundhog Day, and I've absolutely no clue what it was about. So I'm really, Anne, you've done me proud.
I know, it's a very weird thing. And the movie Groundhog Day is about Groundhog Day, and it's a brilliant movie because it's also about sort of repetition, and it's really, it may seem too American. I don't know. Has anybody else seen Groundhog Day here?
Yeah.
Okay. It didn't seem like, what's this weird thing? I mean, what's this weird holiday? But the thing I saw recently that just totally blew my mind, and I talked to people about it, and they think this is, why are you even talking about this? I was walking in a woods, and I saw what at first I thought was a snake kind of coiled up on bark. And then I realized it was a slug. And then I realized it was 2 slugs, and they were slugs mating. And do you know anything about slugs mating? That Jeff knows. Have you ever seen it, Jeff? It's like amazing. It's like the most amazing thing you could ever see. So they're hermaphrodite slugs, but they still require a pair of them to mate. And they intertwine, and then they sort of drop down on this blue membrane that's swinging. I mean, you can see their YouTube videos of this, and David Attenborough, of course, has a narration of it too. And then they have this thing comes out of their heads, and it's a phallus, but their phallus is in their heads, and it meets, and then this blue thing just expands and becomes a bloom. It's like this bubble when fertilization happens. And they're slugs. and they're like slugs. And I just respect slugs so much more because you think of slugs as being the lowly list of creatures, and they have this incredibly complex queer physiology. So I felt like I had witnessed something incredibly special, and even though it's probably very, very ordinary, but it was. So thank you for letting me share that with you, giving me a venue to share it with you.
That is
I
amazing.
just wrote something about it, but
I'm going to tell my friends that this session had a graphic description of slug sex, and they understood be at all surprised because they have a bit of a reputation for that kind of thing. So thank you. That was amazing.
I know it's very it's sort of like if you go online, they'll talk about like slug pornography and things like that. But it's actually very beautiful and weird and beautiful.
So I've actually written a collaborative love story with a brilliant writer friend of mine who's really into insects. So we wrote this whole love story that's all about basically plants and insects and all the different things that plants and insects do to each other. Yeah, I'm on board with you, with your slug.
That's great.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm not sure who dares follow that. I could ask a very mundane question like, what's writing next, Sarah? What's your next quest?
Yes, I loved how you put that. What's the next quest? I think the quest is never ending, I think the quest is more like a kind of staying with the trouble. If I want to re-enchant my own personal relationship with the nature and places around me, that's going to take a lifetime. So I'm still doing the writing about my local places. There's this holy well that was completely destroyed, such that its location is not even really known anymore. And I wrote about it in one of the stories in Fernseed, but I think I'm not done with it. I really, because the story in Fernseed is set during 1976 and the heat wave and the drought, and it's very much about kind of refinding this well and everything that means kind of symbolically. But I really want to go deeper into the history of this well. Why it was such a powerful place of pilgrimage. It was probably some kind of chalk stream on the Icknield Way. So there's all sorts of, things in my mind about kind of the spirituality of water and of walking as well. Because, travelers on the Icknield Way may have come, first to drink and then later on as pilgrims. So I think, that's number one on my list, is to kind of explore the history of this particular holy well.
Yeah, I mean, that's something about Hertfordshire as well, which I kind of forget, is that Hertfordshire, a lot of Hertfordshire must be chalk. Yeah,
we've got the Chilterns not far from where I live. Yeah,
which I've always assumed is Buckinghamshire, but you're going to tell me that a good slug of it is a good slug. Use that word. A good amount of territory falls in Hertfordshire.
A bit, yeah. They're all over the place. They're big.
They're big. Okay, well, look, if anyone's got any other question, let's hear it now, and then we'll do the multiple choice quiz, and then we'll give Sarah the option of having the last word. So, is there anyone with another question they want to pitch or comment or opinion? Sarah?
Yeah, there was a thing. It was earlier. I think it was when Anne was speaking, and I had this thing I wanted to say about supernatural and hypernatural, and more and more I think that so-called realist fiction is just, it's not real at all, because it's full of things like money and the individual and stuff that I'm not sure is really real at all. So I think I'm very much in favor of, yes, like pushing the boundaries of what we consider to be real or natural or hyper or super, and just play with all of that.
So thanks very much, Sarah, for coming along, reading from your collection and entertaining us this evening. And you get the last word.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really enjoyed the questions and the discussion. That's been amazing. And yeah, I'm just going to say a quick note of thanks to Anglia Ruskin University, who did support me and gave me time to write the book. So very grateful to them for that. And yeah, look forward to coming along to future Walk, Listen, Create events in the future.